Hello, my name is David Malone.
And my name's Ian Stroud. And this is Hyperland.
Today we've got my son Ian, who talked to us before about hydrogen, and he promised he'd come back and give us an update. And Ian, thanks for coming back. Is it the report you talked about last time has actually now been published, isn't it?
Yeah, so thanks for having me back. Quite soon, but a lot changes in the hydrogen space. So it's good to keep on top of things. Last time we mentioned this report that was going to come out from the Royal Society on large-scale electricity storage.
Before we get into sort of the heavy stuff, there was a little thing that I understood from last time, but there was some connection that wasn't made. And that's when we were talking about balancing the grid.
Yes.
That I always thought that the windmill turbine things, that they weren't used when it wasn't windy. You know, it was a bit of a joke that it was the wrong kind of wind. But you were saying
only English turbines could have the wrong kind of wind.
I know, to go with the wrong type of leaves. But you were sort of saying, no, they're turned off when the balancing of the grid, which is, it all makes sense now, but it was just, after we spoke and I was like, oh God, I'm then you start going, okay, well, if you leave them turning and they can produce electricity that we can turn to hydrogen and then we can store it, yeah, that makes sense. And it was just a simple thing that I understood, but I didn't quite make all the connections.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, you don't really think, you just sort of think, I can plug things into the wall and I have electricity. Well, you know where it comes from, but how that's managed. Is there just a big reservoir of energy that we just draw from? It's not quite that simple.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you what, I'll shut up and let you get on with some heavy lifting and fill me in about aluminium as much as you want.
So I did actually look that up. So the aluminium thing, you were onto something correct.
Right.
Oh,
okay.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah. It's not something I'd come across. So you
made his
won
day.
up to me on that one.
Yeah, it's Ian Malone 500, Ian Stroud 1.
Yeah. So where the hydrogen comes into aluminium is in, I think it's in production of aluminium.
Right.
Somewhere in this process, which I'm nowhere an expert on. But somewhere in there, hydrogen is produced as a byproduct, and I think it's a bit like the making the sodium hydroxide and the chloralkali process. They just get rid of it because the thing they're mainly interested in is the aluminium itself.
Is the end product, and as you were sort of saying, hydrogen might be made in a lot of processes, but economically it's not.
All this waste of hydrogen is beginning to worry me because hydrogen's light enough that it doesn't actually stay in Earth orbit. It does actually leach away.
Oh.
We're not going to run out, are we?
We shouldn't do. We have a lot of water.
Oh, okay, all right. I feel better now.
However, so this was kind of my mental picture of this before I came across the fact that hydrogen is actually slightly a greenhouse gas.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So this is something I wasn't aware of. It's not actually that great to be releasing lots of it into the environment.
Well, that more reason to capture it.
It's no reason to not go down the hydrogen route. It's definitely worse to just kick out CO2 as a byproduct from combustion.
Yeah.
But being aware of leaks and this kind of thing is definitely something to be concerned with.
But then at some point you sort of think that the production of hydrogen through various byproducts of other productions, that at some point it might be worth them capturing smaller amounts of hydrogen.
It might well be, yeah, especially if there's the infrastructure around transporting it and using it for other applications, then it might actually become viable for some of these processes to use it. It's quite funny. And a good example of this is actually with electrolysis, but it's where electrolyzers are used on the International Space Station, and up there they're used to produce oxygen for breathing, and then they don't really care too much about the hydrogen. I mean, I'm sure they use it for something, but it's mainly about the oxygen.
Yeah.
We've done our usual, and we've wandered all over the place.
That's good. Good. I like
that's
this.
good.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Why stray from the wide path we've been lost on all this time? Getting back to the Royal Society.
Yeah.
Did it say what you thought it was going to say, Ian?
It did. Yeah. It said pretty much what Professor Chris Llewellyn-Smith explained in the lecture that I went to.
Yeah.
And the big headline conclusion was that hydrogen stored in solution mined salt caverns will be the cheapest way to store electricity on a large scale. Large scale meaning tens of terawatt hours of electricity. So yeah, I mean that's a big statement that hopefully the government will hear and lots of people will hear, and people will start building things, or at least coming up with plans.
Yeah, it sort of said in order to meet GB's need in 2050, construction of large hydrogen stores must begin in the near future. What is the near future? It's not going to be tomorrow.
Well, I mean, the reports basically says get started ASAP. There's not a, it's going to take a long time to build that. So
Maybe HS2 has built some tunnels and things we could use.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. They're round as well. They're quite good as a pressure vessel.
Yeah. There you go. I might suggest that to my local MP.
What I don't understand is Royal Society reports. How much weight do they carry? Because I've made several films where there have been committees of scientists who feed into policy decisions, but the feed into seems to be mostly a euphemism for, yeah, we heard you, but we're not going to take any notice.
I mean, yeah, I don't know how impactful they are. I mean, they're very old and very reputable organization, but they're not the government themselves, and they don't actually have power.
There wasn't anybody from the government at the meeting you were at.
No, and I'm not really in the right circles to know how this report was received. I guess we'll see if the government publishes this UK hydrogen strategy, and we'll see if that changes as it evolves over the coming years.
But I mean, the people that were at that meeting, part of their point was we needed to get on with this, that this wasn't just some sort of after dinner chat about something which we might get round to in 50 years' time. The impression that you gave us of that meeting was that they were saying, this is not only what we should be doing, but we need to be doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. It was more of an academic discussion, but centered on policy rather than the science itself as much.
Or maybe we need to set up a lobby group.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they were kind of saying needed to be done, because industry interests have huge lobbies, don't they?
Yeah.
Like the oil industry, for example.
Course,
and
then
and this industry is still getting going, so it's not like it has huge funding behind it, I suppose.
Yeah. Does the expansion, which has been in the news recently, of the UK's stock of wind farms, the fact that is now growing, isn't it the case now that the first part of the Dogger bank has come online?
Yeah, I think it was on the 7th of October that they turned on the first turbine. I'm not sure if it's more than one, but anyway, this one turbine can produce, enough energy to power a home for 2 days with just one rotation.
Wow.
Yes, because they're massive, these blades. Aren't the blades 200 meters across or something?
Yeah, the wingspan of the thing is like 200 meters.
Because occasionally we see them being transported offshore here. You can sit at my window and look out and you see these ships going by with this long, thin perched on the top of it. You think, what the hell is that? And it turns out it's one of those blades.
Yeah, they're quite impressive, and I think that I was reading that's a problem that the industry's been having, is how quickly they've been expanding the size of these turbines, and the various bits of the supply chain can't really keep up with the changes in size. So having a factory that's big enough to make these things, and then how do you transport that?
And they made that out of aluminium.
It's a good question. I'm not sure what they're made of. I think they're polymer composites.
It's just that David told me to sell all my shares in aluminium last time.
Yeah,
I have done. So
aluminium's nice and light.
It is, yeah.
All right, but my question was whether this beginning to come online, does this add to the possibility of the UK actually taking the hydrogen future seriously? Given the link that you were explaining between, wind turbines as a way of using renewable power to drive the process which creates hydrogen.
Yeah, I think they are, because, well, just from the perspective of energy storage, the more wind and solar you have in your energy mix, then the more important balancing the grid becomes. And then you need to balance the grid, you need something flexible. So whether that's power that you can turn on and off easily, like we do at the minute with using a natural gas power station,
or the hydrogen,
the hydrogen, that would fit that very nicely. So yeah, I guess it's the Dogger Bank coming on is following the right trajectory of bringing more wind power online. I think we just need to go further. I was looking at a comparison between the Dogger Bank project and, say, Hinkley C, the nuclear plant, and they're kind of comparable. So Dogger Bank will have a final installed capacity of 3.6 gigawatts. So it wouldn't be generating all of that all of the time. It depends on the wind, obviously.
Yeah.
But Hinkley is going to be 3.2 gigawatts. So we're similar figures there. And then, but I think I couldn't quite find the exact figures for the Dogger Bank, but for the Hinkley, it's 33 billion or something like this now. And it's taking way more than 10 years to build.
Wow.
And then you've got the whole decommissioning later on. I guess we don't want to get too into nuclear, but it just seems like the wind is just much more deployable, and it's hard to see why you'd go for a different option, really.
I can't understand it at all, because you can get the wind power set up much more quickly, and you have very few, if any, safety concerns while it's running. Wind turbines, they might fall over, but they're not going to melt down and spray nuclear particles over Europe, and there's no comparison with the decommissioning costs.
Yeah.
The decommissioning costs of Hinkley will be extraordinary.
It's a good old chunk of change on decommissioning our current nuclear power plants, which are being decommissioned, to tens of millions.
Yeah.
And that cost is at least sort of 80 years. Every single year you got to pay that, and the plant's not generating any electricity.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then the Dogger Bank, by comparison, the project is quite a long way off being finished, but they're able to turn the first wind turbine on as soon as that's ready, and they can just keep bringing them on as they need. So, yeah, I don't know, it just makes a lot more sense.
And if I remember rightly, there's another lot of turbines that are planned off the coast of Kent, and I seem to remember somewhere that reading that the government was pulling back on its funding, which makes no sense at all.
I can believe it, but yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I can't for the life of me fathom what the nuclear part of that is. I mean, what the justification is, because other than they could say, well, that's how we want to balance the grid. That's going to be what we turn on and off. But you can't turn.
No, and this is one thing that the report brings up, is the fact that the more introducing nuclear into the mix actually drives up your cost of electricity per unit.
Right.
So you're better off having more renewables and storage rather than having nuclear. And I guess people see nuclear as, once it's there, it's generates a lot of power, and it's always on.
Yeah.
It's very reliable. But if you can get the right combination of renewables and storage, then I think that solves your reliability problem, really.
Yeah. And then we don't have any kind of risk of Fukushima or...
Yeah, and also it's good from an energy security perspective as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the wind blows in the UK, and you use it here, and you make your hydrogen here.
Yeah,
Relying on uranium being imported, or
that's right. You don't have to worry about where it's coming from and who owns the uranium. You don't have to worry about safety hazards of an immense scale while you're running it, and you don't have to worry about decades of decommissioning costs. When you stack all of those things up, you think, what are they playing at with nuclear? I really don't get it. I mean, if you say, fine, well, we're still going to need something you can balance the grid with, fine, use natural gas for that if you have to.
Yeah.
If you haven't got around to building your storage caverns, because if they want to have a completely renewable grid that can balance from renewable rather than using nuclear or gas, then it's not enough to build the wind turbines. You have to also build your great big hydrogen storage, don't you? Because that's what's going to balance it.
Yes. I sort of wonder with the last point on the nuclear, or why they go for it anyway. I can imagine there's quite a lobby, but I also wonder if it's one of those things that we do have a fairly sizable nuclear industry. We trained a lot of people in that area, so I wonder if it's part of it is just wanting to support that as an industry, sort of regardless of how useful or effective it is. In the same way that that we've sort of done with manufacturing, and in some cases like with steel.
Yeah, I was gonna. That's the thing that was on my mind. Is kind of like, do I mention steel? Yeah, there's a lot of industries that I don't think the government has supported. I wonder whether the nuclear one would be one of them.
The other part of the hydrogen story we did talk about was what role it might have in transport.
Yes, yeah, that was a big area that we missed last time.
Yeah, well, I don't think we missed it. I mean, there was enough to be taken in, but a lot of people I've spoken to since have all gone, oh yeah, what about cars? And I'm like, well, I'll ask Ian next time he's on.
I mean, that is the question that everyone has. They say, oh, battery car versus hydrogen car.
Yeah.
And it's not a question that there's a straightforward answer for. I don't think. There's a lot of things to take into account. I mean, in terms of being realistic, in this country, it certainly seems to me that we're going down a battery electric vehicles route for certainly all light duty vehicles, so cars and small vans and all of this kind of thing. And then there's a question on whether the hydrogen will become involved for the heavy duty vehicles, so your trucks and construction equipment and
buses,
these kind of things, buses potentially as well. And so the reason for that would be the batteries don't necessarily have the energy density and to be able to store enough energy for a large high power application. And secondly, you want to be able to have your truck or your bus running pretty much as possible.
Yeah.
You don't want it sat charging somewhere. But both of these things in batteries, fast charging and high energy density, are definitely things that are solvable and may well get solved in coming years. So it certainly doesn't rule that out. The other thing that I'd say about comparing hydrogen and batteries is people talk about efficiency a lot. And they say, so going from electricity, which is what we're starting with, and you want to move your car around. If you do that via a battery, it's 90-something% efficient. It's really efficient to charge a battery and then discharge it into your motor. And if you go via hydrogen, you have to electrolyze water, so that's 18 to 40-something% efficient, as far as I'm aware. And then then you've got your hydrogen, and then you have to put that into a fuel cell, which is about 60% efficient, and then that you get your electricity back to power your motor.
Yeah.
So it's a lot less electrically efficient to use a fuel cell system than a battery system. But what you're not counting for in that is the sort of the whole life cycle of the vehicle. What does it take to actually make a battery electric vehicle versus a fuel cell vehicle? And in terms of a mineral efficiency of the resources and energy that's required to make a big battery pack is a lot more than for a fuel cell. I think Toyota, I mean, you sort of expect them to be in favor of the fuel cells since they sell fuel cell cars, but they did a nice piece of research on comparing these mineral efficiencies and I guess a more full life cycle assessment.
But also, I mean, at the moment, where is the electricity that they are using to charge up the batteries? But also on the other side of it is you talk about the manufacture of the battery, but then how long does the battery last for, and what happens to the battery at the end of its life? Can it be repurposed?
Yeah, so two very, very good questions. The point of where your electricity is coming from when you're charging it up, it's if you don't have renewable electricity in your grid, then using an electric vehicle, you're not saving the planet.
No.
You are improving air quality. I will make that point.
Right.
But that's looking at a lot of news seems to confuse looking at air quality and climate change, and they sort of muddle these two things.
Yeah.
So you need to have renewable electricity to charge your car. Also, with the hydrogen, where does that come from? If you're not producing that from electrolysis powered by renewable electricity, you're probably doing a worse damage by using grey hydrogen if you're putting that in a fuel cell. So you don't want to do that either.
Yeah, true.
So fixing those infrastructure problems is going to do more to help the environment than whether you buy an electric car today or not.
And the lifestyle of the life cycle of the battery.
Yeah, the life cycle of battery. That is quite an interesting one. I'm not a battery scientist myself, but I work in a group where they do a lot of battery research.
Yeah.
And there's a interesting character in Canada, Jeff Dahn. He's a professor there. I think he worked with Tesla quite a bit.
Right.
But his research has been very focused on improving the lifetime of the battery. How many cycles can it do without degrading?
Yeah.
And he put out a paper at one point saying this 1,000,000-mile battery, something like this, that would last for 100 years.
Wow.
Based on these materials that they've made. I don't know exactly what the costs of implementing that in a real system are, or how feasible that is. But you do sort of wonder that if a technology like that was even feasible, would the battery manufacturers and the car companies even want to use that? Because if you're going to make a battery that lasts 100 years, then you're not going to sell many cars, are you?
No.
So it does seem like that's less of a question of the science, maybe, and more of a question of what's the people choose to be made.
Yeah, whether they pass on all the advantages from the manufacturers. Yeah, that's a different point.
And as you say, it put those things together, and it does begin, I think, to argue that you can't leave this to the free market, because there's reasons why the market will not use certain solutions.
Yes, and
mind you, having said that, when you look at nuclear, there's reasons why governments won't use certain solutions.
Yeah. But on the point of the free market, if you look at consumer electronics, they sell you a mobile phone and it has a battery in it.
Yeah.
And the battery is effectively a consumable. It's not. It's the phone technology will last way longer than the battery. Yeah. The battery has a fixed lifespan, but you're expected to just go and buy a new phone.
Well, that's because
or a new laptop or a new electric bicycle.
Yeah, that's because all the apps and things that they put out purposefully make whatever you've got defunct in terms of I can't use this anymore because it's not been updated. That's not about the material in the battery.
Yeah, I mean that is a point that from the computer side of things that they build software which requires more power, right? Computing power. But even before that is problematic, your phone battery will probably only last you, I think typically is about 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And the hardware, right, why it's in the phone, and even being compatible with software, it can be way longer than that. I mean,
yeah.
And you can get a battery replacement, but it's not an easy thing to do. And it's only now that the EU are bringing in this right to repair legislation, which will enforce all phone makers to have user replaceable batteries. So for any lay person to be able to do that.
Oh, that's good.
And the only reason they haven't done that is because they want to sell more phones. So yeah, you can see how a similar thing could exist for why they wouldn't want to bring in a technology which makes batteries last longer.
Yeah,
it does say that we've got the possibility of hydrogen as an essential part of our energy policy and our energy use, but sort of on both sides of the hydrogen there are problems. Like, will we build the infrastructure that allows our energy consumption to be all renewable? If we don't build the salt caverns to store the hydrogen, and we don't have the kind of technology that you're working on to give us the ability to split water fairly efficiently, if we don't have all of that, then having wind turbines will always have to sit alongside burning gas or oil or coal or nuclear as a way of balancing the grid. And on the other side, if we don't sort out the way that we account for the end of life of products, then they're not going to improve either. If we make it so that it's still not a cost for companies to produce batteries that don't last long and are full of rather toxic heavy metals, which then just get thrown in a landfill, then they'll continue to.
Yeah.
And then the whole business of where did we get the electricity in the middle is sandwiched between two other problems.
Yeah. No, I think that is the issue with batteries, is that the long term how this is going to work hasn't really been worked out. The technology is further ahead in being implemented in vehicles, whereas less so with fuel cells.
Yeah, but what happens to all of those Tesla batteries or batteries?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, people are working.
There must be thousands, tens of thousands of them already.
Yeah, recycling is a big area of research. Battery recycling.
Is there a big battery mountain somewhere, or do we just ship them off to parts unknown and pretend that they're being recycled the way we do?
I feel like there probably is an element of that, but I don't know for sure.
No. Okay.
Send them all to Rwanda. That's what I say. But in terms of the other thing that you pointed out before was investment, and we're not going to get investment until these, the ovens and the boilers and things like that actually come online. So although the technology's getting closer, there still needs to be. Has there anything changed in the investment side of it in terms of companies willing to put the money where their mouth is, I suppose?
So I can't give you any examples of specific deals or anything like that. But what I do know is that governments are using targets for not just production of hydrogen or so production capacity, but also industrial targets for industries using hydrogen.
Right.
So trying to incentivize companies to use the hydrogen and incorporate that into their processes.
Well, it's interesting that you touched on steel before, because that was the last thing I heard was about the sort of hydrogen steel. And in Wales, South Wales, that they were looking at the green.
Are they?
Well, it was the money that was going to Tata at the time
Right.
to do all the levels of steel, to be able to manufacture different levels of steel. And I didn't even realize there were different levels of steel, but that whether that hydrogen could do that, and I think the government weren't investing enough in the fact that they could get hydrogen based furnaces.
Right. I mean, that is trying to use hydrogen in steel making is definitely something that people talk about a lot.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that works exactly.
The real question is how are you producing the hydrogen? Because if you're making grey hydrogen, then the answer to whether you should use hydrogen in steel making is definitely no.
Yeah.
Don't.
But the point is using that as a vehicle to stimulate more capacity being brought online for.
Well, I mean, talking of
green hydrogen.
investment, I mean, you're in one of the UK's larger research groups at UCL. What kind of level of investment is the government providing for basic research into hydrogen? Because it's all very well, everyone, all of us going, oh, yeah, we've got hydrogen fuel cells for cars and we're going to have wind turbines in the Dogger Bank. But is the government actually putting any money into research, or are they just sort of doing what the UK governments usually do, which is just to talk about it?
I think they're doing a lot of talking about it, to be honest. So they are putting some money in. They definitely are, but it definitely still feels that there's a much more investment into the battery kind of research compared to the hydrogen research. And I don't know if that's just carrying over from the big interest that there was in batteries and still largely is, or because I starting my PhD, there was a lot of people very excited saying, yeah, there's going to be so much funding coming into electrolyzers, and this is a really hot area.
Yeah.
Which it is, and there is lots of funding going into, it seems, startup companies, but I'm not sure about the research so much. I certainly haven't felt it.
Yeah.
Are other countries, to your knowledge, putting in more research effort, or do you not know that?
Definitely. We're by no means a leader. So Germany is really going really hard on the hydrogen. I don't know how many millions or billions they're putting into it, but I know that they're trying to bring people in to work who have expertise from overseas. I mean, they were trying to encourage people from here, for example. So they've got lots of money, but they need to direct it somewhere. And it seems like each region in Germany has its own plan around this whole area. So
Well, they're also one of the biggest producers of wind turbines in Europe. I think they are the biggest producer, aren't they?
Maybe.
Siemens is involved with the turbine creation as well.
Yeah, I mean, and they're involved with the hydrogen.
Right. I mean, the picture you paint is we've got academics organising their own meeting and bringing to those meetings, the one you were at, a lot of research and a lot of expertise, and saying, look, we can already tell you the broad outlines of what we have to do based on the science. And as you said, industry is already circling around saying we would invest in this if we knew we were going to get some kind of stability from government, but no one wants to put $1 billion into something and then find the government goes, no thanks. So is it the case, which seems to be typical of this country, that it's the government, whichever Rosette it is, that either doesn't know or doesn't care?
Yeah, I think so. That's certainly the impression compared to countries like Germany, where there is a much more heavy government involvement. And
well,
it's.
If you give us the name of the high-level civil servants or the politicians that need to hear this, we'll see if we can contact them, me and Ian, and and see if we can get them to come on. And then if they agree, we'll get you on, and you can tell them the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of it will be in the this Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, which was renamed from something else recently. So I guess those guys need to get onto.
Why is it that other countries invest money and we change the names on the documents?
I know. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned 1 billion, David, because it's actually Sweden have raised, I think it's 1 billion euros for a 1 gigawatt electrolyzer in green steel.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Is that connected to their big company Vattenfall?
I've no idea, mate.
Okay. All right. No. Well, Vattenfall is one of the. Vattenfall was involved in their nuclear program, but as far as I'm aware, it's also tied up with other kinds of electricity generation.
Yeah. Do they make wind turbines as well?
I think they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I came across Vattenfall because they once sued the whole of Germany for loss of profits when Germany closed its nuclear reactors down. They took Germany to arbitration, and won, as far as I know, and the whole of Germany had to pay.
Wow.
Have we covered the things that you were hoping we would cover? I mean, we haven't talked about airplanes, but I'm not quite sure where airplanes come in all of this. Are there hydrogen-powered airplanes?
Yeah, there are, in fact.
Are there?
They've flown some test flights, haven't they?
Yeah, there's it was an interesting thing that I came across recently. This company Zero Avia, and they're working on a fuel cell aeroplane, and yeah, they have done a test flight, I believe. So this is different to what I think companies like Rolls-Royce are working on, which is burning hydrogen in a jet engine.
Yeah.
So much more like you would with jet fuel. But the Zero Avia people, they're actually using a fuel cell to generate the electricity to power an electric plane, basically. That's pretty cool stuff.
That would seem to be much more sensible, because I remember reading somewhere that if you burn hydrogen in a modified internal combustion engine for a car, the problem is you need to get the same kind of range that you'd get out of a tank of petrol or diesel. You basically need to have a trailer of the size of your car that you're pulling behind you.
Yeah, I mean, hydrogen is a lot less energy dense than petroleum.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much anything is.
Yeah. So there's no point in burning hydrogen in the kind of engine that you would burn kerosene or petrol or diesel in, because as you say, you'd need another jumbo jet behind you.
Yeah. You wouldn't think so.
Hydrogen. But in a fuel cell, that would be fine, wouldn't it? Because they're vastly more efficient.
Yeah, they are. But I mean, you say that, but lots of people are working on hydrogen combustion in jet engines. Not only that, but JCB they've developed a hydrogen combustion engine for all their construction equipment.
Wow.
Yeah, as they see that as a much more sensible route than making a battery powered digger. I think a lot of it is to do with fast refueling and wanting it out on site working all the time.
Okay.
But yeah, and then I guess they didn't go down. I don't know why they didn't go down a fuel cell route exactly. Maybe it's like burning stuff. Who knows? I have to look it up.
The human proclivity.
I'm sure
just burning stuff.
Yeah, we do like doing that as humans. I'm sure they have some reason behind it.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you very much for coming on again. We'll see if we can get somebody from the government. I mean, I doubt they'll listen to us, but we can always ask.
Yeah.
And should we be lucky enough to get somebody to come on, will you come and beat them up for us?
I can try. It's a daunting prospect.
Brilliant. All right.
Yeah.
Listen,
Well, I'll tell you what.
much.
I've put a link in the previous podcast, but I'll put a link to the Royal Society's report.
The report.
The report. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll ping you the what I found about it's a company. I think it's a company called H2 Green Steel, and they've raised 1.5 billion for this 1 gigawatt electrolyzer.
I'd be interested in that.
You
Yeah.
can have a little read of that. I'll ping. I'll put a link to that as well on our podcast. Brilliant. Thank you, Ian.
Well, thanks for having me.
A star again. I still don't know what kind of car I'm going to get next, though. Diesel,
Well,
probably.
I wouldn't recommend a hydrogen fuel cell car simply because there's nowhere to refuel it.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, you'll be a bit stuck there.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I can yet afford one of these newfangled electric ones. But
I'd love to have one, but yeah. I mean, that's the question. Yeah, everyone would love to have a clean car to show off to the friends, say, "Look at me, I'm saving the planet." But who can afford it?
yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Most of us can't afford it, and anyone who lives in a terrace house, how are they going to charge it? You imagine a long terrace of 50 houses with 50 extension cords coming out through the letterbox. Talk about a trip hazard.
I have seen that in London.
Have you really? Only in England. Good God. Anyway, listen, thanks again for coming on, Ian.
Cheers, Ian.
All right.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, if you could leave a review.
And if you want to leave us a comment, go to Substack, look up my name or Hyperland, and we'd love to hear what you thought. And of course, if you've got any ideas for things we should talk about, that would be great too. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.